Let's dive into one of the most mind-bending, unsolved mysteries in American history. But I'll tell you right now, this is not your typical story about a heroic fight for survival. This is a story about a surrender to something that, to this day, makes absolutely no sense.
It's a case that forces you to question everything you think you know about survival instincts, about fear, and about the human mind itself.
Because back in 1978, 5 young men literally vanished into the mountains of California. And when parts of the mystery were finally pieced together, the truth was stranger and more terrifying than anyone could have ever guessed.
So what exactly happened to them? We're going to break down the chilling events of a case that many people call the American Dyatlov Pass, and for very good reason.
All right, so to really get why this story is so bizarre, you have to understand the men involved. In their hometown, everyone just knew them as the boys.
They were this really tight-knit group of friends from Yuba City. Now, 4 of the guys, Bill, Jack Hewitt, Ted, and Jack Madruga, had mild intellectual disabilities. They were gentle, they were trusting, and they really relied on their daily routines to feel safe. The 5th member, Gary Mathias, was a bit different. He didn't have the same disabilities, but he did have a history with schizophrenia, and he was kind of the unofficial leader of the group. And this whole thing just unfolds over several agonizing months. They disappear in late February, their car is found a few days later, but then, silence. For months, until the snow starts to melt in June, and each new discovery just makes the mystery deeper and a whole lot darker.
So, let's go back to the night they disappeared. It all started with a celebration, a victory, and it ended with a single decision that sealed their fate.
It's February 24th. They'd just driven to see a college basketball game, their favorite team won, and they were psyched. They stopped for some snacks and drinks, a totally normal night. All they had to do was drive about 50 miles south to get back home to their own beds. But they didn't. For some reason, a reason nobody on Earth can explain, they turned their car north, away from home. They started driving up these winding, unpaved logging roads, climbing higher and higher into the mountains, right into the middle of a blizzard with zero preparation for what was ahead.
4 days later, a forest ranger finds their car, abandoned on a remote mountain road. But instead of providing answers, the discovery just opened up a whole new can of worms.
I mean, look at this. Every single clue just defied logic. The car was barely stuck in a snowdrift. 5 healthy guys could have pushed it out in minutes. It still had a quarter tank of gas. They could have stayed inside with the heat on. Instead, they just got out and walked away, leaving a window rolled down in a snowstorm? It makes no sense.
And this is where the story gets really, really strange. It turns out there was a witness. A man named Joseph Shans had gotten his own car stuck on that same road earlier that night. He was actually having a mild heart attack, lying in his car, desperate for help. And then he saw their headlights pull up behind him. So Shans yells out for help, but instead of helping him, the headlights on their car just clicked off. The men inside went completely silent. Shans then said he heard strange whistling sounds out in the dark woods, saw other flashlights that weren't from the group, and then they were just gone. They walked off, deeper into the forest. After that, the case went completely cold for months. The snow was just too deep. But then June came. The snow melted, and a discovery was made that turned this tragic mystery into a full-blown psychological horror story.
The body of Ted Weiher was found. But he wasn't near the car. He was inside a Forest Service trailer, a grueling 20-mile hike away. And based on his beard growth, they could tell he had managed to survive in there for nearly 3 months.
Ted was a big guy, he weighed over 200 pounds. When they found his body, he had wasted away to just 100 pounds. The official cause of death? Starvation and exposure. And right here, this is the central paradox of the whole case. Because in a shed right next to that trailer, there was a year's supply of canned food. The trailer itself had a full propane tank for heat, plus matches and a fireplace. They had literally everything they needed to survive. And yet, Ted Weiher starved and froze to death inside. Not long after that discovery, the remains of the other men started turning up. But finding them only highlighted one crucial missing piece of the puzzle. So they found the bodies of Jack Madruga, Bill Sterling, and Jack Hewitt scattered along the path between the car and the trailer. It seems they succumbed to the cold and never even made it to the shelter. But Gary Mathias, their leader, he was just gone, nowhere to be found. So this leads us to the main theory investigators eventually landed on, something called copycat behavior. The idea is that the men trusted Gary Mathias so completely that they were just blindly following his lead, even if his actions were driven by a schizophrenic episode and made no rational sense.
Think about how this could play out. Their deep trust in their friend might have just completely overwritten their own survival instincts. If Gary said, "Don't eat that food, it's poisoned," they wouldn't eat it. If he said, "Don't light a fire, they'll find us," they would freeze in the dark. That trailer wasn't a safe haven. It was a tomb built on loyalty.
But even that powerful theory doesn't quite explain the last, totally bizarre clue. They found Gary Mathias's own tennis shoes left behind in the trailer. The police believe he took the larger, sturdier, leather shoes off of his dead friend, Ted Weiher, put them on, and just walked back out into the wilderness, vanishing forever.
So it all comes down to this one final, haunting question. What could possibly be so terrifying that choosing to starve and freeze in the dark feels like the safer option? What if the whistles in the dark that the witness heard were real? What if the monster they were running from wasn't just in their leader's mind? We may never know,